Chapter 1. You are listening at FameTV.info. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' John Harper, a teacher at Nefaria High School in Philadelphia, felt that he had just been mocked and the person who he believed was messing with him was an international student from China, whose name was Su Feng. So you are saying that you ran into a gunfight on your way to school and that after the gunfight you rescued a complete stranger who was badly shot. As a result, you missed the first 2 classes. Is that true? Harper asked, thinking that it was probably the strangest excuse for being late for school he would ever hear in his entire life. Yes, Mr. Harper, Su Feng replied calmly. No matter how Harper stared into this 16-years-old's eyes, he could see nothing but absolute composure and sincerity. That's ridiculous. Harper knew by common sense that this Chinese student had to be lying. The boy must have made up the whole story so that Harper wouldn't punish him for being late. The punishment would be not allowing him to pass his final exams. However, Harper's rich experience in dealing with mischievous students assured him that a liar would never have been able to remain so calm. Moreover, the bloodstains on Su Feng's uniform and shoes made Harper doubt that perhaps Su Feng was telling the truth. After all, for every lie told, many more lies are needed to ensure the overall credibility. Therefore, for the first time in Harper's teaching career, the bald demon unprecedentedly allowed a latecomer to continue with their classes. Su Feng's classmates were stupefied. Damar, a black student who was sitting the closest to Su Feng, asked the latter with a look of admiration, "Yo, bro, you are amazing. And those bloodstains on your shirt, that's so cool. Can you tell me how you thought of that super cool excuse and got that blood on you within a short time? Your plan is flawless." Su Feng forced a helpless smile but didn't reply. He quietly took out his notebooks from his bag. Was it really that ridiculous? Yes, Mr. Harper was right. The reality is indeed unbelievable, Su Feng mumbled to himself. However, that was how life was, cruel, indifferent, and even unreasonable sometimes. In fact, the strange incident in the morning was nothing compared to what Su Feng had been thrown into 2 weeks ago, and that was the reality. He had spent 2 weeks taking in this new reality. To most people, 2020 was a strange year. Never had Su Feng imagined, not even in his dreams, that one day the entire world would encourage people to stay at home at all times. You would be making the greatest and most valuable contribution to society by staying at home. And Su Feng had been dutifully committing to this noble cause of saving lives and helping others. By locking himself at home. One day, at 4 a.m., Su Feng came across a piece of news that he deemed inconceivable. It was so shocking that Su Feng was convinced that he was seeing things. However, even stranger things followed soon after. Ring, the bell rang, signaling the end of class and disrupting Su Feng's train of thought that Su Feng used to be a nobody in his class. However, he had suddenly become a sort of celebrity due to his creative excuse for being late for school. Some students came to ask about the details of the incident, some were curious about how he had managed to keep his cool, and some wanted to know the source of inspiration for his excuse. Of course, Su Feng knew that very few people actually believed that he was telling the truth. The students who had come to learn about the whole incident actually wanted to know how Su Feng would make up a plausible story. As for the blood on his uniform, the bunch of Sherlock Holmeses unanimously believed that it was simply part of the show Su Feng had prepared beforehand. Hence, Su Feng knew that there was no point in explaining. "Su, come here." It was Harper. He returned to the classroom after another class, when Su Feng was still thinking about how to stop those Sherlock Holmeses from probing further. The Sherlock Holmeses' attitude towards Su Feng took a 180 turn. They instantly stepped back and kept their distance from Su Feng. Damar even smirked and said, "Knew it. Nothing can hide from the bald demon's sharp eyes. Su is in deep trouble." Su Feng's classmates seemed to be enjoying his imminent misfortune too. "You are too young to tell lies like that. How can you possibly fool Harper with that kind of strange excuse? Su, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have distrusted you. Our Nefaria High School is so proud of you." Harper exclaimed as he squeezed Su Feng tightly in his plump arms. Well, Harper had a stocky build. Su Feng suddenly felt sick to his stomach when he saw Harper's freckled nose rubbing against his own chest. "I'm not gay, Su Feng thought one that the entire class was instantly boiling with excitement. Damar, who had been ready to watch Su Feng get chewed out by Harper, was completely dumbfounded. Everyone, please give Su a round of applause. We should treat him, the Nefarian hero, with the utmost respect. Harper told the class after the passionate hug. Most students started to clap almost unconsciously, while their brains were still processing what had just happened and their mouths were agape with astonishment. Just a minute ago, the senior tutor called me, telling me that the police were looking for a Chinese student from Nefaria High School. He said that there was a gunfight near Market Street this morning, and a citizen collapsed to the ground after being shot multiple times. When people were fleeing the scene, a calm, brave young man stood out to save the victim. The young man called the police immediately and continuously encouraged the victim to press on and live. Had he not done any of that, the victim would have been dead from loss of blood before medical help arrived, and this calm, brave, and socially responsible man is none other than my student, your classmate, Su, Harper said. Then he looked at Su Feng, his eyes full of respect. That in fact, although the U.S. advocated for freedom, peace, and democracy, there was not much emphasis on defending social justice. After Su Feng's morning incident was narrated in greater detail, his classmates were stupefied. My goodness, how could he come to school as if nothing happened after all that? How did he manage to keep his cool? Are all Chinese people this brave? Is he Superman? Looking at the commotion in the class, it was now Su Feng's turn to be confused and astounded. How did they know that it was him? Su Feng was very certain that he hadn't revealed his name during the police investigation. Having grown up in a traditional Chinese family, Su Feng had learned by heart to never reveal his name after he had done something good. After all, humility was a prized virtue in Chinese culture. However, Su Feng had forgotten that he was wearing the uniform of Nefaria High School and that he was the only Chinese student in the entire school. Harper gazed at Su Feng with a concerned look in his eyes and said, Su, please accept my sincerest respect to you. I believe that you won't have time for class today as you need to rest, and the police will need your help in the investigation too. Su Feng shrugged, still looking calm. Is he a monster? Damar mumbled. The thought of visiting China after graduation suddenly crossed his mind. Su, how are you feeling? Officer Reiner asked the Chinese student sitting across from him. I'm all right, officer. I'm ready to start any time, Su Feng said as he looked at Reiner calmly. Reiner took a deep breath, impressed by the child's composure, which surpassed his actual age. Actually, Reiner had a rough idea about the gunfight incident after talking to his colleagues, but he had had difficulty believing that a 16-year-old student had been able to remain so calm during the chaos at that moment. Our investigation has revealed that a man in black fired several shots at a civilian, causing immediate disorder at the crime scene. The surveillance cameras from a nearby supermarket recorded the presence of a Chinese student in the vicinity at the time of the incident. At first, the student chose to hide at a safe spot. After the suspect had fled the scene, the Chinese student called the police from a convenience store nearby. He informed us about the direction the suspect was escaping in, as well as the clothing and facial features of the aggressor. Immediately afterward, he checked the surroundings to make sure that he was safe. Then he rushed to help the victim. A witness told us that the Chinese student had been encouraging the victim to stay calm. Even an experienced police officer might not have done as well as he did. After studying Su Feng closely for a few seconds, Reiner said, Great. Su, can you recall and tell me what happened this morning? We would like to know as many details as possible. The investigation proceeded smoothly because Su Feng's thoughts were clear and consistent as he described the incident. However, Reiner noticed that he was slightly hesitant when signing his name at the end of the investigation. His hesitation finally reminded Reiner that this incredible student was still a child. Don't worry, son. We've already arrested the aggressor, so you are completely safe, Reiner said comfortingly. But Reiner got the wrong idea. Su Feng had hesitated because he was surprised at the date below the signature field, May 28, 1994. Considering what Su Feng had been through, the school had kindly allowed him 1 week of leave so that he could rest and readjust at home. The school had even reminded Su Feng that they could arrange counseling for him whenever needed. However, both Harper and Officer Reiner were somehow convinced that this child wouldn't need any counseling. That was because his heart was probably made of steel. Heyish, seems that I'll need more time to adapt to this new identity, Su Feng thought to himself after he returned to his apartment on Market Street. Damn. Who can imagine how I feel about suddenly traveling 20 years back in time? Why did I not finish the last few episodes of Joy of Life 1? Good job, me, now I'll have to wait 25 years. After washing up, Su Feng couldn't sit still in his room. He decided to relax by playing basketball. He believed that he would get depression if he stayed at home any longer. Unsurprisingly, Su Feng's favorite hobby was still basketball. This had remained unchanged, no matter if he was in 2020 or 1994. Moreover, after Su Feng had verified that he had transmigrated to the US in 1994, he learned from the internet in the 1990s that the world he was in was exactly the same as the one he had been in previously. With this knowledge, he daydreamed about living his new life as an NBA basketball player and eventually marrying a rich beauty. However, Su Feng knew that his basketball skills were only good enough as an amateur. Hence, his daydream would not come true. After all, only the main characters in the most cliché and stupidest novels would possess clearly illogical superhuman powers that could turn those kinds of daydreams into reality. Nevertheless, playing basketball was still the best way to relieve stress for a basketball enthusiast like Su Feng. The transmigration and the gunfight were too much to take in even for Su Feng. How can I survive without Dota and auto chess? Su Feng grumbled as he walked towards the nearest basketball court with a basketball in his arms. The US was a basketball nation. It was not hard to find a basketball court. Besides, you wouldn't have to worry about dancing nannies fighting for space here. Su Feng was the only one at the basketball court, probably because it was still during school hours. Feeling the basketball in his hand, Su Feng gazed at the basketball hoop and grinned. Then he performed a series of fancy moves. Su Feng was a true fan of Kobe Bryant. To him, playing cool was more important than getting the ball through the hoop. He twisted his waist, sprang into the air and swung his arm at the hoop. It was definitely Kobe's signature fadeaway jump shot, without a doubt. In the face of such a perfect jump shot, clang, the hoop refused to accept the ball. The instant the basketball bounced off the hoop, Su Feng's mouth turned into an O shape. Harper and Officer Reiner would probably be surprised to see his expression. They thought that Su Feng had a condition related to facial paralysis. Su Feng was speechless. Instead of chasing the rolling ball, he stared at his hands and patted his head. Looking at the image that suddenly appeared before his eyes, Su Feng fell into deep thought. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.